to start by peeling the Band-Aid off. The Band-Aid comes off. This Band-Aid was put on yesterday, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, after the excision of a lymph node. So I'm going to peel it off. Very good. How's it look? Any signs of infection? I can't take a look at it yet. I'll look later. That's more of it than I've seen thus far. They're doing a biopsy of my lymph node now. I should hear about it during the filming of this show. Welcome once again. This is episode 2 of Speaking Truth to Power. The title of this episode is "And Another One Bites the Dust." That is in reference to Entergy's announcement yesterday that they have decided that it will no longer be in the ISO New England power pool as of June 2019. So that is the end date of when the Pilgrim reactor will operate. Now, there's a few things I see from that. One, Entergy is caving. Entergy is trying to capitalize the company by getting rid of their reactors that are cash suckers. It's the reason they shut Vermont Yankee, and it's the reason they are claiming to be shutting Pilgrim. I believe it's this month, maybe this month or next month, when when Entergy will be announcing how soon the Fitzpatrick reactor will be closing. That's in Oswego, New York. So the reason, my name is Gary Saches. I'm here. The show is called Speaking Truth to Power. So this is our second show. Thank you for joining me. The reason why I have this show, I mentioned this during our first episode, and again I want to acknowledge Derek Jordan and the other musicians who created that fine music for our intro and opening. The reason I started this program is because Entergy currently uses these same studios at Brattleboro Community Television, and Entergy does a television show where they call it SAF Store, SAFTOR, SAF Store Mateers, MATTERS, Safster Mateers. I don't know why they call it Safe Store. What's safe about it? So, I wanted to correct a few things from the first program. As I looked back, I noticed that I had forgotten to use that Safe Store Matters or SAF Store Mateers title, which Entergy had put on their program. But it's because of that program and all of the many they've done, I believe it's 7 or 8 at this point, that in those shows they frequently, although it's put together by their communications specialist, the show seems to be repeating a behavior that Entergy has already been accused of. And it was because of our Attorney General. Between the first filming of this television show, episode 1, the No Bull series, and this episode, And Another One Bites the Dust, between then and now, the Attorney General of Vermont has announced that he will not seek re-election next year. I'm glad for that. I believe that Mr. Sorrell cost the state of Vermont millions of dollars by not calling Entergy's behavior, where they misspoke and misrepresented the truth, to the public, to the Citizens Advisory Panel, to the Department of Public Service, to the Public Service Board, to the Vermont State Nuclear Advisory Panel, and others, Had it been termed differently, I think there would have been a lot more benefit to the state. We would have saved quite a bit of money from all that litigation. Okay. In the first show, I also mentioned 45 years as far as how long the linear no threshold dose model has been used. And I misspoke and did not tell the truth in that moment. The truth is it's been used for approximately 65 or 70 years, not 45. So this show is put on, in a sense, to clarify the misstatements and the misspeaking that occurs on the Saf Storm Mateers show. But more so, we took off the Band-Aid today. The Band-Aid from where I used to have a lymph node. It might be cancer, or else it might be my body having held on to not an infection, but a virus from last year. Cancer. I don't know what it's like to be young and think of cancer today. I'm 55 years old. When I was young, in the 70s, in the 60s back then, cancer was a death knell. Now I think that with 300 tons of radioactive effluents each day pouring into the Pacific Ocean, with the 100 reactors in this country, probably in the high 300s around the world now, given that most of Japan's are shut down. Yesterday, in fact, they did start the second reactor in Japan since the Fukushima tragedy, the earthquake, tsunami. So more focused. Cancer is a horrible thought. So yeah, I can think, this is great. They're going to tell me it's a piece of the virus that I had last year. They're not going to tell me that my body's decided to eat itself, which is one way that I perceive cancer. When I was young, it was before the AIDS epidemic. Western medicine has great for broken bones, and I hope I'm healthy. Welcome back. Speaking Truth to Power, Brattleboro Community Television, Episode 2, Another One Bites the Dust. Entergy's Pilgrim reactor will not be joining the auction as a dependable power generator as of June in 2019, and honestly, my educated and or humble opinion, I do not think it'll be operating either Pilgrim or Fitzpatrick by 2018, although I know nothing of what their contracts are. But they're closing down. So really the issue is that Vermont Yankee and its closure at the December of 2014 is becoming and is serving as the linchpin. And you're watching the dominoes. When Yankee fell, so shall Pilgrim, so shall Fitzpatrick, so shall Oyster Creek, so shall Davis-Besse, so shall Palisades. That's the reactor. That one's going to close too. There may be a few left operating. Those 5 that are in construction over budget and delayed may be built. Where was I when I stopped before the break? Well, I've thought about nuclear power for a long time, and I've thought about how, let's say in 2002, maybe there were some releases from Entergy, maybe they were legal, maybe they were noble gases, maybe they were the allowed releases. Every nuclear reactor is allowed to release radiation. They burp these things. When they get too hot, the heat's got to dissipate someplace. And unfortunately, many reactor companies will use the environment as a place to vent. And it is from the environment. Something carcinogenic released today will not show up in a body, for the most part, for years, a decade or more. And that makes atomic energy the perfect weapon. These guys, the people who run reactors, can release radiation, small quantities, minute quantities. When I was a child, 50 years ago, the chances of getting cancer were 1 out of 5. Now the chances in 2015 are 2 out of 5. That's pretty significant. So why do I do this? Why do I sit here in front of these cameras, bringing information to you that clarifies what, well, I can introduce my guest here or not. Clarifying their miscommunications. I remember the very first show that they did. I made mention of it last week, in the last show that I did, where Marty Cohn, Entergy's director of communication during decommissioning, states that Marty Cohn stated that the ISPSI, the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation, which he's calling independent, but which which had been termed interim. Interim and long-term are not the same thing. When on Entergy's television show, their third episode, there's a commercial in the middle of their show. And the commercial in their show states quite clearly, quote, dry cask storage is not a long-term storage for used fuel. That's pretty clear to me. Where do you want to go from here? Who knows what I did 10 years ago that might have led to something forming in my lymph system? Or was it the result of holding on to a condition that I booted out of my system last year? We don't know. If it's cancer, we don't know if it's not. Since the last time I spoke with here at the TV station, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission decided to cancel a study that they had contracted with a national laboratory. They decided to cancel the cancer study that shows that would determine whether or not there was an increase in cancer to residents, ratepayers living nearby to nuclear facilities. The cost would have been $8 million, and it would have taken a few dozens of months. Let's say it takes 36 months, 3 years, $8 million. Well, the NRC, in their thinking that there was going to be a nuclear renaissance, built a fancy new building down there in Rockville, Maryland. $350 million expenditure. And unless I'm mistaken, they're not using it. But they're not going to spend $8 million and finish the study to determine whether or not there's an increase in cancer to people who live nearby nuclear reactors. It's for reasons like that, for reasons of the poor choice by the NRC, that people have taken to calling them "nobody really cares," or that's the acronym I think of for them, instead of Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Welcome back once again. My name's Gary Saches, speaking truth to power, Brattleboro Community Television. Second episode. It's and another one bites the dust in reference to Entergy announcing that the Pilgrim reactor will not be functioning after June 1st of 2019. That's not a shutdown statement. That may be coming sooner, both for Pilgrim and also for the Fitzpatrick reactor in Oswego, New York. So yes, I believe that our Entergy shutting down the Vermont Yankee reactor because it was losing money from 2007 for the 7 years until 2014. Entergy closing down the Vermont Yankee reactor is leading to the rest of them following. There's 100 to go. They shall fall. Nuclear is not. It's not a wise choice at this point. It's not a smart choice because what do you do with the waste? You can't have an energy source where you externalized the costs of the waste when the waste is as toxic as this waste is. So this show exists to clarify the misrepresentations that are passed along on a show called Saf Store Mateers, which is a show that Entergy does here on Brattleboro Community Television. I'm going to bring it back. Most of today I've been speaking about cancer, how it can't be directly attributable to the source. In Japan this week, a study was done that announced that the likelihood of children contracting cancer around Fukushima is 5,000 times greater now after the 2011 meltdown than it was prior to that. What I think is important for people to learn is that the dose that people receive from nuclear power is relative to standard man. Standard man is, 6'1", X number of pounds, blah, 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 male. The NRC's determination and the Department of Energy's determination of the toxicity behind radiation does not take into account that women and children whose cells are splitting and replicating, mitosis, for that reason it is considered an unfair calibrator, so to speak. I believe I made a mistake years ago. After the sale of after Entergy announced that they were going to close the reactor, I received a call from someone in the government who said, "What do you want?" He said, "I'm going through negotiation with Entergy. What do you want?" What I said was, "I want the waste in dry cask storage, and I want Entergy to clean up the reactor on its own nickel." What I wish I had said is, "I want immediate decommissioning. I want Entergy to get out of here within 15 years. I don't know if anyone in the public I don't know if any state has the right to request that immediate decommissioning occur. I think that might be what Entergy was so proud of when that lawsuit just before they announced closure, where Entergy said, Kathleen Sullivan was quoted as having said, she's the former dean of Stanford Law and was the attorney Entergy hired for megabucks to win the case against the state. And she said, now any nuclear company is free to site a reactor wherever they choose. Of course, she said that 2 years after Fukushima and no new reactors had been sited at all, but so it goes. I think the NRC, as they announced that Entergy announced they were going to close the Pilgrim reactor by June of 2019, yesterday, they also stated they were going to use SAFSTOR. Now, that is what I'd suggest people in Massachusetts focus on, is making sure that Entergy get out of there quickly. Not leaving it with the 50 years for the waste to sit there, for the reactor to do nothing. So Entergy intends to put the dry casks, the 200 tons is roughly the weight of each filled dry cask canister. Empty, it's 100 tons. How does Entergy intend to care for them in 100 years? I asked that question, but the answer is that Entergy doesn't intend to care for them in 100 years. Every reference Entergy has given thus far is that Entergy's response is that the federal government is the responsible party in years down the road. And now, if that's true, so be it. If not, Entergy has already been receiving money from the Department of Energy. I don't know if it's every year or every couple of years. The Department of Energy sends Entergy a number of millions of dollars. Now, that's because the Department of Energy is in default from taking the waste, which they said they would take by 1998. So I'm not clear why the state of Vermont doesn't send in to the Department of Energy saying, look, the waste is here in the state, let's get rid of it. Let's get compensated, because the state deserves to be compensated for keeping the waste in the state. So what I'm suggesting is that it's not the nuclear corporation that deserves the compensation for the default, but that it's actually the state in which the waste is being stored. Okay. So my question goes back to, how does Entergy intend to care for the waste in 100 years? Will they put a Russian doll, just a bigger concrete surrounding it, just increasing the weight, doubling the weight perhaps? From one perspective, it can be perceived as Entergy getting off the hook by playing nice. Their TV show constant misspeaking and misinformation campaign, there's no more lawsuits, and then Entergy just leaves the state in, let's say, 10 years, or let's say even 50 years. And Entergy, let's make believe that they do dismantle the reactor 50 years from today and do it within the 60 years of the 2014 shutdown. My concern is that the state of Vermont is being left with the responsibility for the cask maintenance and replacement when it should be on Entergy's nickel. Well, I'm still waiting here for the doctor to call. Come on, doctor. Do I have cancer? Do I not? Today's television show is being dedicated to Nina Swain. Miss Swain passed away last night or this morning. Nina was 2 weeks ago, she was arrested up in Burlington protesting the fracked gas line that's being sent into Vermont. And in 1979, she wrote a beautiful book opposing nuclear power. And I dedicate this show to her in honor of how many years she struggled and fought to rid this planet of the scourge of nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you for watching. Speaking Truth to Power, I'm Gary Saches here in Brattleboro. The reason for the show is to clarify the misrepresentations which is happening on BCTV on the SAF Store Mateers show that Entergy has on now once a month. Be well, take care of yourselves and your neighbors, treat people respectfully. Take good care. Bye now. Thank you for watching.